to other stories, and a new UNDP report has revealed that as many as 24.6% of Ghanaians are wailing in abject poverty in many different spheres. That represent more than 8 million of the country's population as at 2021. Here's a breakdown for you. What this means is that, like I told you earlier, about 8 million Ghanaians are multidimensionally poor, out of a population of 30.8 million. And that's from the UNDP. Now, additional 6.5 million Ghanaians are vulnerable to multidimensional poverty. These are the figures there. Now, let's look at the contributors to the multidimensional poverty. Standard of living, 45.9%. When it comes to education, it takes 30.5% of that. Now, health-wise, 23.6%. Now, so these are the contributors to multidimensional poverty. But let's try to understand, make sense out of this data that the UNDP has released. We've been joined on the line by Bernard Anaba, who is a policy analyst with ISODEC. And we also will be joined on this conversation by Peter Bismarck-Kofi. He's Executive Director of the Institute for Liberty and Policy Innovation. So they are the two we're having this conversation with. Mr. Anaba, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. In real terms, what does this mean to be multidimensionally poor? Okay. Bernard Bismarck-Kofi, grateful that you're joining us. Kindly unmute so that you can take this question for me. In real terms, what does this mean to be multidimensionally poor?
Well, in real terms, thank you very much and good afternoon to your viewers. In real terms, what it means is that many Ghanaians, as much as 6.5%, do not have the adequate survival needs in terms of, as you said, education. They don't have the right education. Okay. They don't have the right access to health services. In terms of their living conditions, their housing conditions, they don't live in the right places. Many may be living in slums, so in case of any kind of shock, they may not be able to survive. Their access to water and other living basic needs for survival, they don't have it. So many Ghanaians, in general, we may be living from hand to mouth. We may have maybe income to live from day to day, have money to expend, but it does not mean that we are adequately protected when it comes to issues of poverty, so that we are easily affected in terms of any shock, whether economic or social, when it comes to in our living conditions. So we are not in the best form of state, or in the best state in terms of our poverty situation.
Okay. Now, before the Sustainable Development Goals, we had the Millennium Development Goals, all of which were targeted at reducing poverty. Why have we not been able to, achieve more than we've been able to do? What are the fundamental factors that have been militating against our effort to reduce poverty?
Yes, I think, well, if you look at the statistics, you'll be told that we have done well since this measure started in the early 2000s, but that is not enough in terms of our achievement in eradicating poverty. And the problem is that we are not applying policy in the right ways, policies that target all the issues that affect poverty. For instance, if you look at issues about malnutrition or food security situation, are we producing enough in terms of agriculture to be able to feed ourselves? We do not have enough support in terms of to our farmers to produce food that's affordable to our population. If you look at health, are we doing enough in terms of training enough health personnel and protecting health personnel in the sense that they do not migrate out of our borders? We are perhaps not doing enough in that direction. We are not providing the right services so that people living in all parts of the country have access to these services. So generally what it means is that if you look at in terms of our budget policy, each year what we allocate for social services in terms of education, health, housing, and that, it's not enough. So it is not solving the problem that will gradually eradicate the poverty that we are talking about. And if you look at the multidimensional poverty that the Ghana Statistical Service has measured, it tells you clearly that people living, about 64.5% or 6% of people living in rural areas as compared to 27% in urban areas are multidimensionally poor. And also in terms of the northern sector, you look at the northern region in particular, out of every 10 people, 8 are multidimensionally poor in northern region alone. That is the highest, rate in terms of in the country. So you have to look at the issues, what is happening, and target policies to try to eradicate the problems. So the statistics tells us that we're perhaps doing improving, but not enough to totally eradicate poverty or even reduce the statistics to a level that is reasonable.
Is there then a basis for us to probably take a second look at policies like the LEAP, and even recently the Free Senior High School, which are all geared towards ensuring that LEAP is to ensure we help people who are really deep into poverty? Does this finding or does this statistics then give us the basis to say, let's take a look at it? Do we scrap it? How do we improve it?
Yes, definitely. And previously, most of the poverty measures looks like just income or maybe expenditure, looking at perhaps to say that how much does a person need in a day to survive. But now the multidimensional poverty indicator is an additional complementary measure that gives us a more broad view about the poverty situation. So it tells you in terms of the people who do not have access to education or lack education, or people who do not have access to water or health and all those conditions. So it gives you a broad view. So it gives you the data to be able to target, the data to be able to look at the policy measures and how they will be able to be effective. So definitely it is a call to action moment that, look, perhaps we are not doing enough. We may be having some of this policy in terms of the LEAP program and other poverty alleviation programs, but are they really delivering the results or the outcomes that we set out to achieve? If they are not, then we need to look at the data again. We need to look at what we are doing and if we are not doing them right. So definitely we have to look at those policies and make sure that they're actually reaching out to the targeted population to be able to be effective.
Bismarck, grateful that you're joining this discussion. Well, we are being told that we're making some steady progress. It's not as we expected it. What do we need to do to ensure that we really get to the point where we all want to be, at least from the onset of the MDGs, then running into the SDGs?
Right, a very good afternoon. You see, the previous speaker made mention of ways we could redefine our social policies, like the LEAP, the school feeding programs. Even the free SHS is part of the social policies. Sure. If you also look at policies that includes where we want to build our business community, especially entrepreneurs, to lift people out of poverty, the way we run it with political colors or lenses had also not been having the necessary impact to redeem or take people out of poverty, because to take people out of poverty basically is about employment. If people are able to have enough income and build their standard of living, it tells you that we are running out of poverty. But when you have more people subscribing to policies like LEAP, policies like the school feeding program, where you have the numbers increasing, that it tells you that, look, poverty is also smiling at us. So for us as a country to move away from political lenses and driving social policies to mitigate the impact of poverty, we have to ensure that all policies or social policies that we put them together should have national interest at heart. We should drive them with national interest instead of driving them with the regime in power, because we've had reports where political party members have to benefit from LEAP, and when the others are not in, you don't benefit from LEAP. Because if you look at the target for no poverty of Goal 1 when it comes to SDGs, that by 2023 we should reduce at least by half of the proportion of men and women and children of all ages living in poverty, by half by 2030. Currently, we are already in the mid of our 2030 SDG goal targets. And looking at multidimensional poverty, to some extent, though I can say we have reduced it from 48% averagely between 2017 and 2018 to 45.1% in the current average multidimension. Yes, there's been a progress, but COVID to some extent, yes, we progress the efforts we put in place to ensure that we're able to have the population in terms of poverty using the Goal 1 target. We are still not doing enough. So to do enough, I think the policy should be more targeted. And we know we do all these things all the time. We say, yes, target the individuals than to some extent making it a blanket policy. Sometimes the salaries and the incentives we pay to directors, supervisors, coordinators of these social policies are even more than the benefits the beneficiaries have to even receive. So we create a policy where those who are not more dimensionally poor, do not fall in that bracket, benefit more from it by in the name of being the administrative or administrators at the end. So we have to structure it properly like that. As we are targeting, those we are targeting must benefit more and more so that we can lift them out of poverty. But I always say that the best option to take many people out of poverty had to do with employment. So far as our employment status aren't enough to take people out of poverty, obviously we are going to have these data where multidimensional individuals are still rising, because health, education, standard of living, inequality, housing, and now climate change is also coming in. And so the problem is going to be compounded. It's going to be more than we're expecting. Look at what the rain is causing in Accra and other places. And you can see that all these people will be falling into the bracket of multidimensional poverty if we do not consciously redefine our social policy, because society is evolving. So we must also try to restructure social policies to meet the entire societal changes that we are experiencing.
But in terms of setting our priorities right, you talk about employment, creation of employment. Government cannot absorb a lot of people. If we want to really deal with employment, it's not looking at the centralized government system. It's about government helping people to create jobs. Agric is one thing that we can look at to do this. Look at our poultry. The poultry has the potential, according to researchers, to create 1 million jobs. We've almost collapsed it. So how do we prioritize such that we can know that if we engage in this, we'll probably deal or reduce unemployment, which would obviously lead to the reduction in poverty?
Right. So you see, the employment programs we put in place, or maybe by the various government, are basically meant for vote buying. So if you look at NAPO, for example, if you look at what we are going to run for USTAT, we've seen the National Entrepreneurship Innovation Plan, presidential pitches. We've seen youth enterprise support, and a host of them. And they are all vote buying programs. And vote buying programs wouldn't solve unemployment, because once the intended purpose of getting votes, is achieved, often you don't see those policies running again. And NAPCO is a very critical example. So for us to ensure that we run employment programs targeting the problem of poverty or trying to reduce poverty, we have to look at it sector by sector, because we run programs like NAPCO and we do not look at it sector by sector. If you want to run agriculture, for example, agriculture is the backbone of the economy. We study that back from the primary level through to the junior high and SHS to the university. But yet we did not see it as the backbone anymore. Now the service sector is running the economy. If you look at the pension scheme, the service sector is the one contributing a lot to the pension scheme. So it means that we have to look at more investment into the private sector and that of the service sector and the manufacturing to drive people into those sectors, to reduce poverty, than to have ad hoc employment programs at the executive level learning with the purpose of buying votes from the youth rather than to save them out of poverty. You know, poverty is something we shouldn't be looking at it like we're going to solve it with just employment. Yeah, employment is just one part of it. But a well-structured economy where opportunities are created for you and I, that I can even switch jobs from one to the other, one job to the other, and still get enough to live, and still get enough to lift my standard of living. Such an economy is what we are looking for. And that we will see that the multidimensional thing we are talking about today will be reduced or be halved by 2030. Okay. It takes conscious effort to do that. Social protection policies are not enough because the numbers are increasing. People are still subscribing to social protection policies. And when it happens that way, you need more money to invest in social protection policies. Yet, we are not able to reduce poverty. We are not able to halve poverty. And if you're not able to halve poverty, and unemployment is also smiling at us, then we have a long way to go as a country. So I think that employment programs should be targeted and the purpose should be of national interest over vote buying and political interest. When we do that, we succeed. So we don't put coordinators who are party foot soldiers. We don't put administrators who are party foot soldiers to man and run the affairs of employment programs. It wouldn't work that way because the purpose is to come and loot and make some money out of the process. Look, the youth need jobs to survive, period.
Okay.
The youth, they need jobs to survive. Women and men need jobs to survive. Now we have what we call adult unemployment. There's a youth unemployment and there's adult unemployment now. Okay. We have people from the ages of 35 to 55 years unemployed. And that falls within the adult unemployment range. What are we doing to them? We've said that from the past 10 years, we have a huge youth that trying to build a country. In the next 20 years, a 30-year-old youth will now be 50 years. Sure. In 10 years' time, a 30-year-old youth will be 40 years old without a job. You see, adult unemployment is also increasing. So once you are targeting youth unemployment, you should also be looking at adult unemployment. Otherwise, you have more aged individuals who will be depending on the youth who are equally not employed or underemployed.
Serious revelation there. Let me bring in Ms. Anaba again. Ms. Anaba, so if we are targeting a policy like LEAP, which will make monies available to older people and people who we deem to be in abject poverty, mustn't we change the strategy by probably bringing in the peasant farmers, give their monies to them to rather farm and use the proceeds to feed them? Is that probably a way we can ensure that this is sustainable and probably even make more monies available to these people?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think, yes, that is true. And just like my colleague also said earlier on, you want over time, you want to reduce the amount of people who want to go on LEAP. That would mean that you are achieving your poverty target. So you don't want to be even expanding the LEAP program, which means that more and more people are falling into that category. So it also goes to the point of what he said, that in terms of all the policies or the expenditure we are making now, do we actually mean them in terms of their effectiveness to deliver what they have to deliver? If you put a particular policy in agriculture, make sure that if you intend that a 200 cedis reaches a farmer in a particular village, that 200 cedis actually reaches the farmer to produce what they have to produce. But at the end of the day, what happens is that the farmer ends getting up to maybe 30 cedis or 40 cedis out of the 200 cedis that the government has allocated through the Parliament of Ghana. And that is the real thing. And that's the issue about where the political economy issues come in, where the actual allocations that we do each year does not reach the actual intended beneficiaries to be able to to reduce poverty. So those are the things. I travel around the northern part of Ghana, and eventually I look at the land area, the arable land and other things, vast lands, and I look at it, I realize, look, human labor alone may not be able to push these lands into productive distance. You need a kind of mechanized system, but you need the government to support in that kind of system to help the people to produce adequately to feed themselves. But it's non-existent, and most of the youth are also traveling down south to look for jobs and all those things. So those are the kind of policies that government has to really look at. Every cedi that is spent is effectively spent to ensure that it brings out some output that is more than the cedi spent. And that is what we are not doing. And that is why we are going in circles, and each year we are spending and expanding the LEAP beneficiaries and all that. It means that we are actually making the situation worse and worse as we move on.
So as we move on, what is your expectation of what government needs to do if we really are serious about ending poverty? In a minute, if you can do it for me, I'll be grateful.
Well, my expectation is that government have to look at the data and look at its policies again, and to see whether we are actually making the inroads in terms of the positive development that we want, and make sure that the expenditure that we are making now actually reaches where we intend them, and reduce all the issues about malpractices that reduces the effectiveness of government policy and other things, so that eventually that's the only way we can achieve what we want to achieve. We have a certain amount of resources, and if we start spending them in a way that they are not delivering the goods or the goods that we expect, then eventually we are not achieving that purpose. And that is what we have to do. Be more effective, be more intentional, and ensure that whatever expenditure, whatever resources that we are allocating to eradicate poverty, it reaches that intended policy. And we are actually monitoring and making sure that each year we are seeing improvement. Not that we'll go through a full cycle of maybe 4 or 5 years to come back and realize, no, nothing has been done, and we have just spent so much resources and we haven't moved any inch in terms of making inroads into reducing poverty.
Bernard Donab, I'm grateful to you. He is a policy analyst with
Thank you very much.
This is a Pulse here on the Joy News channel. Let me take you to Germany, where Germany says jobs, agriculture, and security will be a top priority for its tenure as it takes over the presidency of the Sahel Alliance in Africa. The Sahel is directly threatened by poverty and Islamic terrorism. Thomas Sparrow, political correspondent from our partner station DW in Berlin, has more on this. Now, Thomas, what exactly is the Sahel Alliance, and why is Germany involved in this region?
Alliance because it was one of the founding members of this project in 2017 in order to support the countries in the Sahel, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger and Chad. These countries have very serious security challenges as well as political and economic problems, and Germany is the 4th largest donor to the alliance, which now has 18 members, behind the World Bank, France and the EU. And since it was created, the Sahel Alliance has spent more than 28 billion euros in the region.
What does it also mean for Germany to take over the presidency of this development group?
Development Minister Svenja Schulze traveled to Mauritania to formally take over the one-year rotating presidency of the alliance. The previous president was actually Spain. Schulze said her priorities for the Sahel Alliance are jobs, agriculture and social security in the region, as well as what she described as preventing state-free spaces. Other elements of Germany's presidency include fostering education and employment projects, as well as infrastructure such as water supply, hospitals and schools.
And how important is the Sahel region for Europe and more broadly for the
German minister actually said that the Sahel is not only threatened by poverty, but it's also an epicenter of Islamist terrorism and also a place where Russian influence is growing. At the same time, however, it is a young population, which means that it's not only about solving problems, but also about providing opportunities. So this region, all in all, is certainly important for Europe and more specifically for Germany. There are also concerns in the region as to whether there could be a power vacuum in Mali once UN peacekeeping troops leave the country by the end of the year at the insistence of Mali's military leadership. So in general, the key word for Germany and more broadly for the alliance seems to be stability. That is the main goal for Germany's one-year rotating presidency.
Grateful to you, Thomas Sparrow. He is with our partner DW. So we're here on The Pulse. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more.